follow your passion. Good or bad advice?
Depends on what your passion is. For me, it was awful advice. They told me to follow my passion, and I wanted to be a professional basketball player. I'm 5'10" and Armenian. If we know, most men want respect, most men want peace and stability, most men are gonna want to have kids, and statistically speaking, they probably will have kids. So then we have to reverse engineer and go, okay, this is what you want. Now let's walk through the sequencing of what communities of people actually have what you want. Everything you want is actually on the other side of living a committed life that's full of delaying gratification towards the greater good of beauty and goodness and being the hands and feet of Jesus on this side of eternity and within your own home.
I refuse to stay in a victim mentality. I gotta stand and fight for my honor and my family. That's how I did it, cause you know that's how it had to be. So now I'm slaying dragons and I do it happily. I told them I refuse to be another casualty. I looked inside the dragon's eyes and then I told them casually, hi, I'm a dragon slayer and I got a dragon lair. I'ma go and slay a dragon, then I'm gonna drag him there. I don't care, I ain't scared. Look inside my heart and there's a lion there. Conquering my dragons, I ain't fighting fair.
San Diego-based YouTuber and musical artist, Ruslan is known for carefully crafting both art and content within the intersections of faith and popular culture. Born Ruslan Karaoglanov to Armenian parents in Baku, Azerbaijan, Ruslan was a child when he immigrated with his family to the United States in 1990 to escape religious persecution after an ethnic conflict broke out in the wake of tensions between the dissolving Soviet Union and the Azerbaijan government. Settling in San Diego, Ruslan became interested in hip-hop around age 8, and by his teens, he was performing his own raps on stage. He transitioned from a full-time career in music to creating content on YouTube as a thought leader. As a married man with children, he is not afraid to fight back at the rapidly growing red pill movement, while providing men an opportunity to find their God-given dreams and make them a reality through godly ambition. Stay tuned to the end of this episode for a special sneak peek at next week's guest giant and how you can find your true God-given purpose.
Ruslan, it's good to be with you today. I'm grateful that you are taking the time to join us. I know that Nico, my producer, and you have a little bit of history together, so he's been very familiar with material. Of course, are many millions of people. Other than what people already know about you, what should they know, and what is not a part of your formal introduction you think they should hear?
I am a connoisseur of walks on the beach in Southern California and yerba mate. That's something most people may not know about me.
All right, there you go. That's a good way. I'm a connoisseur of those walks down here in Florida on the beaches of the Gulf
You guys,
Coast.
those beaches are nicer than ours, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, we have about maybe 3 months of weather that kind of emulates your weather, January, February, and March, although this year is strikingly cold, actually. Anyway, we did not get on here to talk about the weather or beaches, although it's a good conversation. We are on here to talk about something really, first of all, we can make this meander into what's important to you. But one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on is because in Leading Giants, we always say, hey, if you do that, you can become a giant. We go slay some dragons. The primary market that we go to are men from 25 to 45, but we reach guys that are younger than that, and we reach guys into their 60s. And a substantial number of women, actually. Now, we're directing our business mostly toward entrepreneurship, leadership, influence, anything that carries the necessity of influence, which means that we also have some pastors, too, that go through influence training and all that kind of stuff, which is super important for them. But one of the reasons that I have it mostly directed toward men is because there's a deficit in what they're taught. And they're taught that just by way of their born sex that they are toxic and bad and all these things that are happening. And so I'm trying to help them move away from the confusion that they're facing out there. You yourself, come from, how long have you been in the United States?
Oh, goodness. I came here in 91, so almost 25 years. Well, no, 35 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so 35 years. But you did come from, a former communistic power and government, which also makes you, the former Soviet Union, which makes you think probably a little bit differently than a lot of young people and contemporaries about issues like this. And anytime I post something about socialism, the comments just go crazy, and they're usually filled with people telling me that I don't know what entrepreneurism is, and I don't understand socialism, which are totally bunk. But, so the perspective that you have on all sorts of things is going to be really interesting because you're a good model for young men to do what is required to just man up and to accept responsibility and to think on their own and do all these independent things. So why don't we start this way? What do you see as the biggest problem that young guys are facing nowadays? And what makes you identify it, and how are you helping them?
The biggest problem that young men are facing today, I think the biggest problem that I'm seeing is a distraction across the board of political ideology, faith, age, demographics, content, you name it. There's a huge issue right now with distraction and where men are going for information. And so, for example, if you're on the internet, more and more men are reverting over to kind of more red pill space content, right? What we would call like the fresh and fits and that whole world. And so the issue there is there becomes a hyper masculinity. There becomes a hyper patriarchal perspective on everything. And that's unhelpful because now the measurement for what it is to be a man is to get women and make a bunch of money and, brains, bronze, and game. And it's that shallow without a whole lot of equipping of what it means to be a father, and especially what it means to be a father when you have girls and how do you lead women and all these sorts of things. So I think from that perspective, they're being distracted and they're being sent down this pathway of very superficial things that in and of themselves aren't bad. Having game, having muscles, having money, these things aren't bad, but they're very shallow. On the Christian end of the spectrum, they're not necessarily being equipped on how to have godly ambition, how to work hard, how to go beyond just theology, but to praxology and to living out our faith. And so you're getting hit on that side from the faith angle. And then in the world, like you said, they're just being told that any type of masculinity is bad. Anytime, and you need to be more in tune with your feelings, and stoicism is bad. And so I think there's conflicting narratives that they're being told from every single angle. And you take that and you layer that with the distractions of video games, the distractions of social media, the distractions of pornography, the distractions of all the other issues that are happening. In a kind of volatile time, I think it's a lot easier to self-soothe and be distracted. And you got men that have completely gone off the rails and don't even care to be in a relationship. The term for those guys kind of be incels, some men going on their own. There's just so many different distractions that they're being hit with. And I think it's hard to find not just good sources of inspiration and information, but good sources of now, how do I implement these things into my day-to-day life and start to move the needle? And so if I had to pinpoint it, I think right now we have more distractions than ever. And getting good information that I could apply and know what my North Star is becoming more and more difficult.
Did you know that Leading Giants has over 120 micro-learning modules from 4 to 19 minutes on entrepreneurship, communication, anything to maximize your influence? We are here to help you build the life of your dreams by maximizing your influence, growing a company, leading people at levels you've never led before. If you're in sales, having a greater opportunity for increased closing percentages and larger activity than you've ever had before. It's time now for you to jump in and join Leading Giants. All you have to do is press that button right down there. In order to access this, share with your friends, become a giant. We'll go slay some dragons. I love that answer because you're putting it down to basically one word, and it is distraction. And I've got to agree with you. I think one of the interesting things about the whole, Andrew Tate, red pill, all that kind of stuff is first of all, let me just begin by condemning it the same way that you did, that it leads to something that becomes unbelievably instructive. That has to be out there. But there is something about it that's interesting. I heard a guy one time, this is going back 30 years, his daughter wanted to watch an R-rated movie. And he said no. And the daughter and the mom and the sister started arguing, well, there's only one bad part in it. It's just, that's all. There's just one bad part in it, and I'm mature enough, I can handle the rest. And the dad was like, listen, I'm in that household and I'm trying to make this argument and it's, I'm being debated too much. So he just went silent and he made dinner that night. And after dinner, he brought out brownies And he said, I made my favorite brownie. You guys love my brownies. I said, this is great. And he goes, I made them a little bit different today. I just put one little bit of the kitty litter in it. Just one tiny drop. But it's only a little bit, so it's not going to affect the whole thing. And they got the point. And obviously he didn't do that to the brownies, but they didn't go to the movie. So the reason I say that is because most of that movement is actually pretty good. Get yourself in shape, handle responsibility, build a business, do these sorts of things. But all it takes is that further part of the message to poison the entire thing, not to mention that they're almost entirely absent of any aspect of faith. I mean, Stoicism, has many good things about it, but it's passionless, and it's because of that it doesn't know how to love, right? So ultimately there's that gap there. So, when you see it and you have a certain empathy for why guys are doing this, and then they swing all the way to the other side, they have to be formed somewhere in between there. And there's like a certain aspect of that you can't just come at them and say, Jesus is the answer. Although I'm a dedicated Catholic myself and I believe Jesus is the answer, but Jesus isn't the answer to learning engineering either. Right. So what is that natural aspect that you're showing guys to help them where they are in order to bring them to a further understanding of what's good and true?
I think we have to reverse engineer on what do men ultimately want on an intrinsic level. Most men want respect. Most men want peace. Most men are going to want to have kids. And I think we're wired to want to pass down our biology and be fruitful and multiply. So if we know most men want respect, most men want peace and stability, most men are going to want to have kids. And statistically speaking, they probably will have kids. If that's where they are, they want to make a good living, right? So then we have to reverse engineer and go, okay, this is what you want. Now let's walk through the sequencing of what communities of people actually have what you want. So before I try to go and go in for the Jesus clothes, right, which I love that, right? Like I'm naturally evangelistic in that sense. I first have to lay out the sequencing and go, hey, the red pillars will tell you that half of marriages will end in divorce, which is not fully accurate. There's a book called The Good News About Marriage, which debunks the statistic. It's closer to 40%. 70% of marriage divorces are filed by women, and it makes no sense. Men should go on their own. They should just spin plates and never get married. And then I go, okay, well, would you want your kids to be brought up in a home where you're not present? Would you want multiple kids with multiple women? Do you think that that's helpful? Right? Because that's the logical path. And anyone that knows anyone that's had multiple kids with multiple women knows how draining that is spiritually, but how catastrophic that could be financially if now because you're going to have to pay child support whether you marry the mom or not. Okay, so that's out. We don't want to have multiple kids by multiple women. Got it. Okay. We want stability. We want peace. We want respect. We want financial stability. So what are the communities that actually have that? What communities really have that? And what you'll discover very quickly is the communities that have that are the least likely to get divorced, statistically speaking, that claim to have the healthiest sex lives, the most enjoyment and fulfillment, is actually people who practice their faith regularly. So you'll have a lot of Catholics in that community, and you'll have a lot of very committed Protestants, and you'll have some Eastern Orthodox. And so when you reverse engineer that and you go, okay, so there's something about this faith aspect, practicing faith aspect, that actually gets you to the destination. And let's look at those numbers. So if I told you that, hey, in order to be if you wanted to be shredded, there's a correlation to all the people that are shredded tend to love chicken and broccoli. And I know chicken and broccoli doesn't seem sexy on the outside, and who wants to eat chicken and broccoli? But that's the defining fact. There's a lot of chicken and a lot of broccoli and some rice. Okay, if that's where we're going, then let's walk through that, and then now I got to do the sequencing to properly help them get to that faith aspect, because I think faith is what drives it. I think faith is what gives a man the balance to be tough and tender, the way Jesus was, the way David was, right? And so I think we have to reverse engineer that. And so then we walk back sequentially and we'll go, everything you want is actually on the other side of living a committed life that's full of delaying gratification towards the greater good of beauty and goodness and being the hands and feet of Jesus on this side of eternity and within your own home. And so that's how I would reverse engineer it. And so we would just have a very logical conclusion on that, but through the lens of what do you actually want? What is your dream? Your dream is to have a family. Your dream is to be financially stable. Your dream is to be respected. Your dream is to have peace. Your dream is to have sex. Great. Let's reverse engineer that. And now we look at it and we go, okay, well, gosh, man, you can't deny the data and you can't deny the reality of that. And then when I have the opportunity, I try to bring these guys into my life. I try to bring them over for dinner. I try to show them the beauty of having my kids within arm's reach for 22 hours of the day, right? And being an entrepreneur and having a wife that loves me and respects me. And that is more caught than taught. People have to kind of see it. And that's the biggest thing, if I'm being honest with you, that when I kind of talk to folks from the red pill adjacent space, my buddy Zuby is an example I think of. Every time we hang out, we spend way more time of him wanting just to be around my family than making content and going out and hanging. Like he's like, man, we need to see this. Right. And I know from a content standpoint, it could get weird trying to put your family in content, be a family blog. And I'm not going to do that. But the more I could show my life in person and show that to guys, I think the better. And I think we need more men doing that in a relational aspect. Right. So guys that are on the fence, guys that maybe have gone red, whatever it is. I think if each of us who are married, stable, happy, healthy, can allow a young man into our circle and spend time with them, not teaching them everything, but just letting them catch the reality of our lives, I think therein lies potentially the antidote to some of this stuff. And that's hard. That's not easy to allow guys into your life. That's very difficult.
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind when you say this. One is, first of all, statistically speaking, these guys who want to make a lot of money, if they just look at the stats, married guys with children make the most money. They're the highest net worth of anyone. So even if you were just a utilitarian, you no interested in goodness and you just want to make the most money, well, that would be one of the things you do to do it, There's a couple of things too. Are you familiar with bulldog mindset? So he mans himself up. He becomes total, stoic type of guy. He really did. He got in good shape and he started business. He became a millionaire and all that kind of stuff. But now he's just teaching guys basically how to get women. Okay. And one of his videos is this guy says, well, I'm a virgin and this woman's coming over that's a virgin and I don't know how to handle this, and basically his advice is, listen, just have sex with her. It's going to be good practice. It's not going to go good no matter what, but you need as much practice as you can possibly can to get in on this. Okay. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to have this guy on my show. And then I watched his later videos and the guy, like 7 years later, he's now married and he's a father, and I'm watching him talk about being the head of the household and accepting responsibility. And I'm like, okay, I'll bring this guy on. But I noticed he still has the old video on. So I said, hey, listen, just so you know, I watched this one video. I'm interested if you just have that on there for clickbait to build your channel or not, because if some guy gave that advice to a guy who used that advice on my daughter, I'd kick his ass. How do you feel about that now? And he's like, yeah, I guess I would too. But he still has a video up. Anyway, the more I was talking to him, the more he basically was starting to see that this whole idea of waiting late in life to get married so you can build your body and build your finances, I'm like, listen, brother, you know what? Get married. I don't really mean this, but get married before you're ready and have kids before you can afford it. I mean, I say that as an emphasis to pull against the culture of get a little tiny dog that weighs 3 pounds and expect it's going to fulfill your needs until you're 40 years old. Sorry, it never does. Nobody's on their deathbed going, that dog that I had for 8 years when I was in my 30s fulfilled me. Okay. It's their kids and the what they build around them. So I'm kind of setting up 2 points. The other point is that, you even had a quick short on Joe Rogan saying something about, Jesus, right? And this kind of like conservative evolution. What I'm watching are these guys who enter into this stoicism or this ultra masculinity, who are sincerely seeking what's true. And I see this in a lot of them. I told John, you're on here because I see a lot of goodness in you. And I'm not here to attack the badness, but I want to know if you're on path to ultimate goodness here, right? And I think that the necessary path for a lot of these guys is to be tethered to the desire for what is true. Mm-hmm. And ultimately speaking, there's small t's. 2 + 2 is 4. If you know that, you're closer to Christ because he is the capital T. If you think 2 + 2 is 5, you're more deceived and you're getting further away from him. So the more lies that we embrace, the more we know evil, the more good truths that we embrace, the more we know Christ. And eventually we move into that pathway to get there. But there's a lot of things, like you said, that confuse people about this. So if you have commentary on just guys moving through that evolution, that'd be great. But I do want to tie it to, as silly as it sounds, to me, this is silly. We have to talk about this. But the idea of socialism. Mm-hmm. Because there's so many people who move away from goodness because they don't understand human nature. Mm-hmm. And something like socialism and capitalism, even though it's a political realm, it is at the core of destroying a person at the level of human nature and not understanding human nature. So the more you believe that, the more other lies you have to believe that are out there. And the archetype enemy for communism and peripherally socialism is God.
That's good.
Because ultimately speaking, we were made by God, which means that we have human nature made by a designer, and we have to get rid of that for people to believe this other thing. So that's a little bit of a rift to set up for a guy who I know processes things quickly and has a lot to share. What are your comments on those two different ideas? That evolution of the guys looking for truth and the idea of certain things like socialism getting in the way of it, as among many things, by the way.
Yeah, I think that process of seeking truth can be a long and messy process, especially if you're just not ready for it, right? And so for me,
hey there, Giant. Dave Durand here, and I want to invite you to subscribe to our brand new e-newsletter where you will get the best of the best tips and insights to unlock the giant in you, build an empire, and slay some dragons. Sign up below. Let's go slay some dragons.
Fortunately or unfortunately, I had a lot of traumatic things happen in my childhood, right? Being sexually assaulted, my dad not being there, getting arrested at 11, smoking weed, drinking out, like all the things that like most dudes are gonna like want to do. And I was sexually active by the time I was like 12, right? And so by the time I get to 13, thankfully my mother moved me to another neighborhood. So I kind of got that debauchery out of my system, and I wasn't a Christian yet, but I knew that, I'm done. Like, I don't need to smoke weed ever again. I don't need to do any more crime. I'm done. I'm going to be a good kid. And I made a very conscious decision of that at 13 years old in 98 when I remember watching Jordan play the Utah Jazz, right, in that championship. Like that was where my head was at. And that then allowed me to set up becoming a Christian several years later. It was that mindset that allowed, and then that was another 2 years of wrestle and waging war and all these things about who is Jesus, who is not Jesus, right? So that was a process. And I think sometimes we are not okay with people walking through a messy process in that regard. So I love the way you put that in terms of that seeking of truth. If there's a genuine desire for seeking of truth, in my opinion, I think most people will land on Jesus is the ultimate capital T truth. There's just too much there from a history standpoint to a utilitarian pragmatic standpoint. I think there's too much there. But I think we have to be patient with people as they walk through that process. And that could be difficult, right? I have young men that I'm mentoring. And man, is that at 18 to 19, 20, for whatever reason, God just preserved me. I avoided so many opportunities to be more sexually immoral, to go and hook up with a lot of girls, and God just preserved me. But if you're that 18, 19, 20, you're halfway good looking, you're halfway persuasive with your mouth, and you could talk well, you can really get in a lot of trouble doing a lot of self-destructive activities that feel good in the moment. And that and walking through someone with that can be very difficult. And so I think for us as leaders and men, I think the challenge for us is to be patient. Now, the socialism bit is interesting because socialism, like to your point, doesn't blame the individual. Everything is about the system. Everything is about the external impacting the person versus in a biblical worldview, we would say, no. It's the person that impacts the systems that corrupt the power that then perpetuates the damaging of people on a societal level. And so it's completely backwards, right? And so the more we do this thing where we hyper individualize the person and then we blame the system. Like you can't have it both ways. You can't be hyper individualistic at the same time blame the system for everything. And so I think getting people, even just defining like what is capitalism. I bet you a lot of young people can't even define what capitalism is, right? And so capitalism is the idea that we, the people, should own as individuals can own the means of capital and private property and the things that generate innovation and technology. Individuals can own, versus in communism or socialism, it's consumed by the government. Even though they say it's the union should own the means of distribution. No, it's going to become the government. And when there is no God, the government becomes God, and then the individual is made to desire this utopian society, when in reality, yes, systems matter. Yes, laws matter. Yes, opportunities matter. But the biggest thing in all these things is our ultimate choices that we get to make day to day. And some of us have greater access. Some of us have greater relationships. Some of us have greater networks. Some of us have limited networks. But it's still the overwhelming amount of it is going to come down to the individual. Now, to bring it full circle to men who are hurting and men who are going through it, there's still this need, not to overtly say socialism, but there's still this need to blame the system. Women, feminism. They even have words for it. I remember when I was debating Rollo, he said it was these weird words that they would talk about, just how feminism is controlling everything. And I'm like, okay, even if all that's true, that's still on the men to fix, because we allowed this nonsense to happen. And now we get to fix it, right? We get to choose on if we're going to fix it. But it's ironically enough, this horseshoe theory where the people sometimes on the furthest of the right still keep blaming the systems and how society is bad, and not taking inventory and saying, no. Yes, there's systems. Yes, there's influence. Yes, there's a weird zeitgeist happening with some of this fourth, fifth wave feminism. But ultimately, I can control what I can control. And I see young men getting married and having great marriages from as young as 20 all the way to 35. And they're thriving and they're flourishing, right? Now, maybe that's selection bias on my part. Fair enough. Maybe I'm just around a different type of community where I'm at. But I see these things and I go, it still comes down to the individual choices that we can make. And yes, we're not all equal. We're not all going to start at the same place. But let's not allow this idealistic, the system's bad, left or right. And this is on the right as well. This is on Tucker Carlson and some of the narrative that's coming out from the right, and society and big government. No, it's like, yes, but there's never been a better time to be alive. Yes, but there's never been a better country to be alive in right now to change the trajectory of your life. And so that's how I would navigate those conversations. And again, it just requires patience and it requires hyper responsibility, which is difficult for most guys, because we don't want to be told, hey, ultimately at the end of the day, the buck stops with you, dude. You got to figure these things out.
Yeah. And ultimately speaking, that's the thing that people are attracted to. So I'm in a different place in life than you, because I'm going to be 55. I have 6 kids, my 7th grandchild on the way.
Man, that's amazing.
And thank you. And my kids are all out of the house, and my oldest is going to be ordained a priest in May. My second is married with 4 kids. My third is married with a second kid on the way. I have a daughter who is a nurse, great, just a hardworking woman. She's a mother as well too. I've got a son who's graduated from Madison, and he's getting married right now in June. And then I've got another son who is a sophomore at Ave Maria University down here in Florida. The point of this story is that guys want responsibility, and young people altogether want responsibility. I give a little talk to my kids. And by the way, this is not about me being the perfect parent and my kids being the perfect people. That's not it. Everybody, doesn't matter what story it is. Everything comes with flaws and whatnot. But you have to be able to see the things that went right, right? Here's one that went right. I said to my kids when they were very little, this started when they were like 8 years old. I said, hey, I'm not raising children. I'm raising future adults. And so I'm going to talk to you every year that gets older that way. So when they were 13, I gave them their birthday presents in a laundry basket, because I no longer was doing their laundry.
I love that.
And then as they got a little older, I clarified a lecture that I started with them when they were quite young. And the first part of the lecture was, listen, when you're 18, you're gonna have this much money saved. And it was a little bit different over the years, because my oldest one is so much older than my youngest one. And at that time, you're going to spend that money on college, and I'm going to help you with the rest, but you're going to have skin in the game. And when you graduate from college, you are going to be living someplace else, like right when you graduate, on the day of your graduation. So be prepared for that, because you're an adult and I'm an adult. So I'm going to live my adult life and you're going to live your adult life. If you have a commission job, you can stay here for 3 months, or if you're going to be a teacher in the fall, if you choose those professions. Otherwise, you're out on your own. If you're 18 and you decide not to go to college, then you've decided you're an adult, in which case you're going to go out on your own. and that's fine too. But you need to make those decisions on your own. So here's the interesting thing. None of my kids looked at that as obtrusive or non-loving or non-caring. Every single one of them has accepted the challenge and we're gone. I mean, I didn't literally, from the time they graduated, I didn't have any of them hanging around the house, and happy and independent and very close to me as a regard. So why? Because I talk about human nature a lot. When the kid is 3 or 4 years old, what do they want when they're helping mom in the kitchen or dad in the garage? They want to grab the tool, grab the equipment and do it. No, I want to do it. And that's what they want with life. They want to do it. And the more that we retard them by doing it for them or telling them they're incapable of doing it and calling them children until they're 26 and keeping them on insurance and everything else, the more they are totally dissatisfied in life. But the parent starts to think, oh, if I say, no, get out on your own and get a job, they're going to harm themselves or they're going to be whatever. No, give them the opportunity to live their life. When you talk about the things that you talk about and you see this trap that people get in, how do you talk to the 30-year-old who is stuck now? And, they're younger than you. They don't have the maturity that you have. They don't have the life experience that you have. You were further along when you were 30 than they are now. But they're not 18 now. They're not 12. You can't give them that advice of the 12 or the 18-year-old to get their act together then. They have they have ingrained bad habits and environments around them that keep them in this place. What do you see for that guy? How do you help him out of it?
Wow, that's such a great question. Thank you for sharing all that, because that actually is really helpful as a dad. My son is going to be 10 this year. So that's super, super helpful practically and encouraging. What you're describing is this bizarre thing that's extended into 30s now for a lot of people, which is called adolescence, right? So adolescence used to be this window between when someone goes from being a child to being an adult, right? It's like that in-between window. And so navigating that is tricky because it's been extended from 18 to 22, you're in college, you're at.
I want you to riff on this long, but an interjection, because the difference between boyhood and adolescence is size.
Yeah.
Basically, what defines them that way is they're utterly selfish. Yeah. And now that extends into that time before they become a man. But just as a point of reference on that, but go. Yeah. I think people want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. So I think that phase has been extended and extended and extended and extended. And now you got dudes living with their mom at 30 and they don't really know what to do, where to start, right? And so how I navigate those conversations is I try to, again, grab onto the hope. What do you ultimately want? Let's dream. Perfect scenario. 5 years from now, how does your life look? Walk me through that. Paint me that picture. So I think we have to start with the hope aspect. We have to start with the imagination. We have to start with the dream. They need a different story. They need a different narrative, right? And I think we start there, and then I go, okay, now let's work backwards and let's find that one. Power of Habit calls it a Keystone habit. And Atomic Habits, it talks about stacking habits, similar to skill stacking. It talks about stacking habits. And so if you could find the one thing to do as someone that's going through a tough thing, the rest of it can kind of build on top of it, right? What is that one thing you can do that's hard? And now let's build everything around it. And that's going to look different for different guys. Some guys honestly just need to start waking up earlier so they have more time in the morning. So they go to the gym so that they don't stay up late and look at porn. So that, right? You find that one thing that they need to do. And a lot of times that one thing will domino everything else in their life to slowly fall in place.
Yeah, I love that point. Yeah. That one thing matters. Young guys, they say, what should I do for a college job? I'm like, find a crappy job with long hours that make you want to quit and stick with it the whole summer. Mm-hmm. Because no matter what you do in life afterwards, if you can build the virtues to get through that sort of thing, you're going to be in great shape. And by the way, the devil hates order.
Yes.
So when you know, hey, that alarm goes off, I'm getting up, I'm going to do something good, all sorts of incredible things start to happen. I think you really hit some wisdom on that whole idea of do something hard.
Yep.
Learn that and let it generalize. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
No, go.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, so the thing of finding that hard thing, you also need to allow flow state, like get to flow as quickly as possible. So for some guys, like telling them to get in the gym may not be helpful if they don't know the basic fundamentals of compound lifting. And so now we got to go over like you need to go get a trainer, just spend some time learning the hard things, because if you just tell a guy, go get in the gym, and he doesn't know how to bench press, squat, do a pull up, do a deadlift, he could hurt himself. Like he could really hurt himself and then never go back to the gym. And so we have to find how do we make that initial thing that I need you to do, how do we make that feel more like play and more fun? And then you get into flow, and then that becomes the thing that changes the trajectory of your life. Thankfully, when I had already knew how to lift. So by the time I found the gym, it was like, wake up early, go to the gym. Now I have my mornings. Now I can get more done. Now I can be right. Everything fell in line from that one habit. Other guys may not have that, so they might need to just learn to play and get a coach or partner or someone to walk them through the compound lifting. For example, I'm using that as an example. It could be picking up a new trade. It could be picking up a new skill. It could be a variety of things, but you find that one thing and you try to articulate what flow is, and the faster we can go in a flow state, the faster you can learn, the more fun it becomes. So for example, I'll get personal. I'm learning boxing and Muay Thai right now. And my coach does a great job of making it feel like a game. I say, man, it's like I'm learning how to play a video game with my body, because it's very technical, and it requires conditioning and having the lung capacity to go. And the more he makes it feel like play, and more he makes it feel like a video game, the funner it is, the more my brain shuts off, and it goes from, oh gosh, this is hard, I'm winded, to, oh, this is fun, we're having a good time, and I know I'm going to get better. Fast forward that out in the next 3 months, the next 6 months, the next year, it'll compound, the compounding effect. And so Keystone, power habit that you could stack with other habits, and don't do something too hard. Find that flow in it, because if you pick something too hard, you're going to quit way before you actually find the groove and the timing to let it build and compound over time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, martial arts, I'm a second-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and I didn't start it until I was 18. So, I mean, I was so tight, touch your toes. Man, I can't even touch my knees, and, kick. Okay, wow. I just literally had some 16-year-old kid kick me in the head, and I could kick him in the shins, and to go through this like humbling process of just forcing yourself to stretch, forcing yourself to get to something else. I'm a big fan of any form of martial arts, by the way, for that reason. People say, well, what style should I get in? It doesn't matter. I mean, today's day and age, if you're going to fight anyway, everything becomes mixed martial arts anyway. So you're better off learning a lot. But if you're learning it for the discipline, not necessarily for the actual fighting aspect, it doesn't really matter which one you get in. It's the one that you actually spend the time in. Yes. Because it's really about who you become when you go through that than anything else at all. So you've done a unique thing. You've done something. I'm interested in what you say about this. And I don't know, because we're very like-minded on so many different things. This might be one that goes in a little different direction, although in principle we wouldn't be wrong. But people say all the time, let me just do this. I'll say this. Follow your passion. Good or bad advice?
Depends on what your passion is.
Oh, that's actually looking at it, by the way.
For me, it was awful advice. They told me to follow my passion, and I wanted to be a professional basketball player. I'm 5'10" and Armenian. Terrible. The worst.
So, okay, I think that we're striking the same chord here. What I always tell people is, if you follow your passion, most people who follow their passion follow it into an art or something like that, where they can't make any money. And it's a bad idea. And not only that, their passion becomes no fun anymore. Even if it's not like an art, but it's like mountain biking. So you like open a mountain biking store. Well, you might hate everything about that. Or, for the people who follow their passion, you know who they are? They're the first contestants on American Idol. I say American Idiot because these first episodes where the person can't sing at all, like I can't sing. And the judges are like, man, no, this is not your thing. And 10 million people in the audience used to, when the show was popular, they used to watch it. They're like, no. And the person looks at the judges and say, no, I will be the next American Idol. Well, sure, you can follow your passion, but you're no good at it. And your mom told you were amazing the whole time, but you had no ability to assess critically whether you could or you couldn't do it. That person should follow his passion in karaoke on the weekend and then go become an accountant or whatever. I mean, the bottom line is, really, if you just pick something that you can be good at, you're going to bring passion to it. But you have a unique blend, though, because you understand music, you're good at it, you have an entertainment aspect to yourself, you're good in front of the camera. So you obviously have a passion for these sorts of things in communication, so you've done both. What advice would you have coming off of your days of being disappointed you're not going to make the NBA?
Yeah, so I think the way I would look at it is if we have three different circles, and one of them is passion, one of them is something you're good at, and then one of them is what the market is asking for you or the opportunities in front of you. So you have these three different circles, and that sweet spot in the middle is what I would describe as God's purpose for you and your generation. Because even that word purpose can get really weird, right? Because I think our ultimate purpose is to know God and make him known. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself. That looks different for everyone in our generation. So there's a passage in Acts that talks about David walked out God's purpose in his generation, right? The God's purpose for us is the same, know him and make him known. But for our generation, that could look different. So I think when I think of what am I good at, what am I passionate about, and what is actually needed from me in the marketplace, what opportunities are in the marketplace. So I love the way you said it. I think we would say follow the opportunity and take your passion with you, right? That's from Dirty Jobs, the gentleman that used to host that, Mike Rowe, talked about that a lot. And so I think you have to take an inventory of what am I good at? What opportunity is there? And what am I relatively passionate at, right? For me, it was the NBA. Okay, I discovered genetically it's not happening. I'm not that good at it on any type of, professional level. And it just wasn't, it's just not in the cards for me. Now, I still enjoy basketball. Like we just went and saw the Laker-Clipper game with my son a couple weeks ago. Took my whole family. It was great. And they actually allowed me to play in this pregame tournament on the court. So I got to play on the Clipper court.
All right. Very cool.
You see the clock on the scoreboard. And, it was cool.
How'd you do?
I did awful. I got one shot off, and it was an air ball from the 3-point range because I didn't realize how different an NBA 3 is. So I did.
Yeah, right. It's like 80 feet further back.
Yeah, but it was fun. And so I think then I said, okay, well, I want to be a musician. I want to be a rapper. And I was a little better at that than I was at basketball in terms of like the grand scheme of things, and more slots, even though especially when independent music became a thing in the 2010s. And I made that a career from 2015 to 2020. But then I came with the intersection of, hey, can I do this? Is this sustainable? Can I go and keep touring with little kids at home? No, I can't. I can't keep touring. I am not making the money I need to make to provide for my family and to just maintain sanity of not feeling like I'm doing everything. And so I had to pivot over to YouTube. And I still make music. I still release music. I've released, 4 or 5 songs this year alone. But I understood that there's more opportunity for me in the YouTube space and being a thought leader than there is in the music space. There's less competition. And it's actually something I'm better at than music. So I leaned into the thing that I'm passionate about it. I was more passionate about music. And then you take your passion with you and the passion grows. And so I signed a publishing deal. I'm writing a book. I never thought I'd be writing a book, but I'm passionate about storytelling. I'm passionate about packaging these ideas from this conversation and how can we package this in a way that makes sense to walk people through a linear process. I'm passionate about these things because the macro purpose is to know God and make him known in my generation. And so I think if people can tap into, yes, know the macro capital P purpose, and then the lowercase p purpose is in your generation. What is that thing in your generation? I think it's going to be an overlap of passion. What are you good at? And what is the market asking, or the opportunities in the marketplace, the connections you have, the proximity you have?
Giants, we need your help with something. The world desperately needs more giants like you. Head over to Apple Podcasts and give this podcast a 5-star rating so we can build an army of giants and go slay dragons together.
Yeah, that's awesome. People ask me a lot. They say, why are you still doing something? How come you're not retired? I said, well, because when I die, I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. I mean, I don't want to bury any of the talents. Your book, talk a little bit more about that. It's I have my 6th book coming out in January, and the writing process is really it's one of the most rewarding things you can go through, and frustrating too, and fascinating. You'll write a chapter, you'll step away from it, you'll come back to the same chapter, and you're like, what kind of idiot wrote this? This is the dumbest thing I've ever read before. And you're like, I'm so glad that I stopped that from being published. And you rewrite it and you riff. Well, and by the way, I should say I have that experience. Maybe you're not having the experience, but talk about the experience of writing the book and tell people what this is going to be about and when they can see it coming out.
So I'm writing a book about godly ambition because I think a lot of the solutions to the problems we're discussing in this conversation alone is going to come down to a misframing of ambition, where the society, socialism is going to say ambition is evil. A lot of folks in church are going to say ambition is evil. But there's an interesting parallel in the scriptures about a healthy ambition, about a godly ambition, about the things we aspire for, which is ultimately know God and make him known. And then how does that practically flesh out? So the first half of the book, which is more or less done, I'm about 5 or 6 chapters in, is setting up the framing of the theology around it. And then the second half of the book is going to be leaning into the praxology. How do we then implement godly ambition with things like habit formation, with things like goal setting, with things like learning to learn, to get better, to level up our skill set. So that's going to be the second half of the book. And it's been an interesting process. I got a publishing deal with the Christian arm of Penguin House, Waterbrooks, which they're responsible for like a lot of the Tim Tebow books and kind of that whole world. And so I'm super excited to kind of flesh out that second half. And we'll see how long it takes us to flesh it out. They're asking for the manuscript by June. I don't know if we'll get it done that fast. But so I'm about 6 chapters in, and then we're going to lean into the praxology. So the first half has been just laying that foundation of like, what does godly ambition look like from Scripture? And then now let's go into how do we flesh that out? How do we help the average person tap into living out their godly ambition in a way that's constructive and productive and not destructive?
Yeah, that's great. We actually have had quite a few, I don't know what you'd call them, like little shorts on the difference between ambition and drive. And I always say, listen, just so you know, people who use the word ambition, because I'm about to, in a way, like you said, discredit that word. I always say, I actually have no problem with the word. People who use ambition, and there's a denotation and a connotation. And with the right person saying it, that connotation means good things. So to be clear, I don't have a problem with the word ambition. You might even hear me say it. But classically speaking, ambition is a person who strives for a post or recognition that they don't merit. Mm-hmm. Whereas a driven person will work through that entire process. Another way of putting that would be that ungodly ambition is seeking something you don't deserve or merit. And godly ambition is being the driven person to actually merit what it is that you're seeking.
I love that.
And so I think it's important work that you're doing. I think it's really good that people can see that, because otherwise what happens is, especially a lot of times people have a conversion and they're like killing it in the world in some way, shape, or form. Neither it's conversion. They're like, I think I should go be a missionary. And I'm like, no, you shouldn't. You know, you're building a business right here. You should keep doing that. In fact, Mother Teresa was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin one time. I heard this story secondhand, so if it can be fact-checked, I don't know. But there was a guy, very wealthy, independent business owner of a company that you would know. But he said, Mother, I was so impressed by what you were saying, the work that you're doing. I kind of feel like maybe I should sell my company and go help you in Calcutta. And she said, do you know what you should do? Keep building your business, build it even better, so me and my sisters don't have to set up shop here in Milwaukee. Mm. And it's like, what a great way to look at it, that we have to just basically, we're not going to have, our personalities aren't going to change when we have a conversion or the deeper that we know God. You know, St. Paul was a zealot before and after. Mm-hmm. But the direction that he pointed that is the thing that matters. And that's the thing that comes out so powerfully in this sort of thing. And it's pretty impressive. Okay, so let's talk. You currently have young children. Mm-hmm. You are in that fight. My kids are in that fight with my grandkids. It's not a fight. I mean, the fight against the world. They're not fighting with the grandkids. Everything's going well with that. You know, what are you doing to? You can't shelter a kid, because nowadays it's a fool's errand. The things enter into that. And this, I'm not a nihilist or fatalist on this. I'm not the type of person who's like, oh, well, your kids just have to be exposed to everything because it's just out there. I don't believe that. But I do know that they can be playing with a kid in a park and the kid's going to pull a phone out and there's going to be something there. And there's going to be, you know, it would be impossible. You'd have one of these horrid apps. What is it like? What is it called? Life 360 or something like that. You put this app, you give this app to your kid when they're in high school and through college. Have you ever seen these? It knows where they're going, what they're doing, how fast they're driving the car, what they spend. Every single thing about them is managed usually by their mother. And all of a sudden they're like 23, they're going to graduate from college and they're afraid to do anything. I mean, they're afraid to get a job. They're afraid to speak. I said, I don't mean this, but okay. I said it. I said to this wonderful Catholic woman with 6 kids, very conservative, okay? And she just knew what I meant. I said, you know what I want to see? I want to see an 18-year-old kid squeal his tires past somebody else, yell some totally rude thing to him and say, your girlfriend's hot, she should check me out, drive down the street, and if there's conflict, throw a punch. I said, I don't really mean that. But that's that side of the red pill thing, which is men are so emasculated. They won't take any risk. They won't just go out there and do something. And of course, she knew I didn't mean it to that degree. I'd tell that kid, knock it off, can't behave that way. But the point is like, just at least be a man enough that we can form you, right? If you just sit there so like water, we can't even shape the clay and get it in the oven and bake it. So you've got this interesting thing where you've got all sorts of things coming at your kids at this young age, and you need to teach them how to be strong at the same time. You need to teach them that the world is teaching them something different so they can recognize it when they see it. There's a lot going on. I'm really happy I graduated from the young parenting aspects when I did, and I'm 55 as opposed to going through it now. But talk about this with younger guys. How are you counseling them if you see them making the wrong moves and you want to help them out?
I think in my home with my son, what we do is we have a lot of preemptive conversations. And so we started the conversations about sex very early, initially just biology, right? In terms of like, what is biology? Where did you come from? What is it practically? How does a woman get pregnant, right? And so very early on, he knew that babies came out of mother's vagina because the daddy's seed and the mommy's egg. Like I'm talking 3 or 4, he understood this, right? And so we had those conversations incrementally. And then about a year ago, we had the actual, so he was around 8.5 when we had the actual conversation, what is sex, and describing the act and how it feels good. And so I think for me, there's a lot of anchoring that I want to do with him, of teaching him the beauty and the goodness of the things that God intends for our bodies and the things that God intends for our lives. And so that we're trying to have those conversations preemptively. And then recently we just had a conversation about drugs and what drugs are. And so my son is in this interesting spot where he's homeschooled, but he goes to like these co-op groups twice a week. But we have family and we have people that he's exposed to, close friends of mine that have been to prison. You know, one of my best friends did half of his natural life in jail, you know, his adult life in jail. And so we have those conversations of like, this is how this becomes a reality for someone. This is what drugs do to your body. This is why they're not good, right? And so we're anchoring the conversation so that he's getting the context from a biblical worldview. And I think that is what we're attempting to do, to be preemptive, so that he's not learning about sex from some kid on a playground pulling out a phone, right? He's not learning about these things from the world. He's learning about these things from our family. And then in terms of just the other men that I'm around, it's going to vary on where they are in their journey, right? If they're already in church, a lot of times we're talking more work ethic, skill stacking. You need to figure out ways to become providers. If they're not in church, we're trying to just get them to understand that reality, but get them into a church and get them exposed to different people from different paradigms and access to people that are not in the same background as you, because that opens up your world, that opens up your horizon. And so that's how I'm working with kind of like the young men that I'm mentoring. But again, they're going to be in such different places based on their are. So we're trying to kind of custom fit. Hey, where are you? And what are the next tangible step you need to be taking?
Yeah. You know, I like that. I think one of the things that happens for a lot of young guys is they're not very thoughtful and they get lazy in raising their kids. There's a couple of things they don't understand. One is that when you say, put that down, whatever it is, you can give your kid an order, and the kid doesn't put it down, and they start doing things, and this would be controversial. People are, oh my gosh, but I believe in this. And then they count to 3. Don't count to 3. I'm like, where are you in life going to have somebody count to 3? That you don't count to 3. I said, put it down now. I mean, if you teach your kid that they don't have to obey you until you count to 3, what kind of world is that? I mean, don't cross the street. You're going to count to 3 and they're going to get hit by a car. Okay. Don't cross this. You hear my voice. That's it.
Good.
But you have to get up off the couch and make sure it happens at that moment. And they're tired, so they don't. So they get lazy about it as opposed to making it happen. They also don't understand that your kid, if they can't hear and recognize your voice, will not hear God the Father's voice. That's how they learn God the Father's voice, is through you. So these things are important, but there's another aspect too, and that it's like the intellectual aspect of parenting, which matters. And I think that I tell people this, I said, if you have to combine understanding with unrelenting principle. So I see parents make one of 2 mistakes. They're ultra understanding. Well, kids are going to be kids, so just hand them roach clips and condoms. No, let's not do that. Or they're principally speaking, which is everything you need to know. It's in the Bible. Okay, well, every moral thing you need to know is in the Bible, but there's a lot of things, like you said, David's time was different than now. So I don't see anything in the Bible about how to manage YouTube. Okay. So that doesn't make the Bible any less complete, but it just means it's meant for one thing versus the other. So I always say, listen, if you see something scandalous, like your little kid sees a magazine in the store when you're walking by at head level, or something comes on a screen and it's a beautiful woman, you don't just look at it and go, that's disgusting. Because if you do that, the kid's going to think, well, your generation is different because I actually think it's pretty good looking. So you have to be smarter, and you say, that'll catch your eye. And they're like, what? Yeah, that'll catch your eye, won't it? It's pretty easy to look at that. Okay. But here's why we have to not look at that and see it differently, and then to explain it. Otherwise, we cut themselves off and they say, I can't relate to my father.
Yes.
Or that's filth. And then make the kid feel bad because they saw it. You're basically turning your kid right toward pornography if that happens, because they're like, I cannot talk to my dad about this. Yeah. Have you, found this? Have you, gone through that sort of thing where you have to stop and say, wait a second, I remember when I was young, because your story is really important this way. You were attracted to these things, and then you found the dangers in them at a young, wise beyond your level. But how do you counsel your kid with that when he might have a natural passion, but you want to steer him away from it?
So thankfully, we haven't had you're talking about the sexual aspects of things yet, thankfully.
Yeah.
And the way you put it very eloquently. So the way I would describe it is like every good thing that God has for us is perverted by the devil.
Yes, exactly.
Right. And so that there's the issue isn't the woman's body. The issue is misusing the woman's body for the gratification and the objectification of her body by someone else, right? So the issue isn't you want to eat delicious food. The issue is the abuse of said food to make you a glutton. The issue isn't, hey, I need a release, I need to relax. The issue is now we're introducing foreign substances into the body. So we're perverting the things that God has for us that are good. And I think sometimes, especially in a lot of Protestant circles, unfortunately, we don't have a great theology around pleasure. We don't have a great theology around enjoying the things that God has allowed us to enjoy. And so we're navigating, hey, I know you want marshmallows. There's nothing wrong with having a marshmallow occasionally, having ice cream. But if you sneak out of your room and get marshmallows in the middle of the night, it's literally how you're going to rot your teeth, because you've already brushed your teeth and now you got sugar on your teeth and you don't want that. And so let's redirect that desire for enjoying something delicious, for having fun, and redirect it in a way that's, again, constructive and not destructive. And so we're attempting to redirect these things towards the greater good. And I'm sure we're going to cross that bridge with sexuality and
either way. That's great. And it starts with those other things too. And the kids get a little bit easier. Right now they're in latency, and it's best to keep them in latency, meaning you don't introduce all sorts of sexual ideas to them when they're in latency. You just let them stay there, because kids who are introduced to that, they actually start to literally go through puberty early. because they're introduced to ideas that start firing up certain aspects of their brain. So I think you're really wise to do that. There's a book that I recommend called, I think it's called Leisure by Josef Pieper. And it's not really entirely about all of the eating aspects of things, but it is about like that recreation side. The other thing too is it's fascinating, and this is kind of coming full circle to what you're talking about with the red pill movement. These guys all are fixated on lower desires, right? They're like the lower desires, not the higher desires, and they don't reach to the higher levels. And there's 4 levels of happiness that we go through, like all these things. You just introduced such a great idea that even great theologians will say that sins that people commit, they're trying to do a good. So, you want to relax. That's good. Now you do it the wrong way. You even want control in your life, and even murder is it's control in your life. Control in your life is a good thing. That is a heinous way to go about it. So there's like this aspect, and the 4 levels of happiness. The first one is physical. We eat and drink, have sex, smoke, but you can't eat, drink, have sex, and smoke enough to be happy for very long. So it only keeps you happy as long as you're consuming the thing you're consuming. And then as soon as it goes away, you need twice as much to get the same level of happiness. Then we go to accomplishment, and that's where the red pill guys are. Accomplishment, earn money, do something big, get in shape. But those guys become dissatisfied. So a lot of them start giving back. I'm giving back. And they go to that 3rd level of philanthropic, but they're like, I can't eat enough, drink enough, smoke enough, win enough, earn enough, accomplish enough, give enough, until ultimately speaking, where are they? The 4th level of seeking happiness, which is existential. And you and I both know what that means. That our hearts are restless until they rest in God. And by the way, the proper credit goes to St. Augustine on that. So, but important things. What else are you working on that you want people to know about, that you want to share? What's important to get across to maybe a newer audience that watches my channel that is now introduced to you?
Yeah, I love that. The 4 levels of happiness. That's brilliant. So we have a lot of these conversations on our 3rd channel. We have a channel called Mastermind My Business, which kind of leans into a lot of this entrepreneurial life, habit formation, mentality, mindset. And that's called Mastermind My Business with Ruslan. So that's honestly the channel I'm probably most excited about. We have a channel called Bless God Studios, which is more of like our clips. And that's a pretty broad. We'll kind of talk about a lot of just whatever's trending at the time, as well as long form conversations. And then my main channel, if people just search my name, Ruslan, it'll come up with the Ruslan KD channel. That's our biggest channel. And it's usually going to revolve more around faith and culture and some current events. And so those are kind of like the 3 levels. We have a prayer journal out that a lot of people have been responding really well to. So it's been great to take people from the need to pray to developing a system for them to pray and writing out their prayers. So we've sold, close to 10,000 of those at this point. All right. And so that's been really good. And the reviews of that have been good. People can check that out at blessgodprayer.shop. And and then just writing this book, launching an app, working on potentially doing a 3-day conference probably this time next year. So a lot of moving pieces that we're working on right now.
Well, that's great. You've inspired a lot of people that I know, and I think I really do love it when somebody like you has that well-roundedness, and you're saying, hey, listen, these principles, being Catholic, and this would be Christian regardless, but I always call it the Catholic advantage. And that is that if you are hardworking, you are honest, you are forthright, you have compassion, you have the gifts of the Holy Spirit, understanding, wisdom, you adopt the cardinal virtues of prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance, which lead, ultimately speaking, to faith, hope, and charity too. You do these things. Basically, what you have described is the person you want to hire. And so you also have picked the person you want to follow. And I think those things matter. My companies, I've built some pretty good sized businesses and sold them. And they were not Christian. I've built Christian companies, but mostly just secular businesses. And very diverse, just like any regular corporation you have in. But we always just like put the brakes on wokeism. That's not coming in here. We're just not doing that here. Nobody ever felt anything other than good about those circumstances, because even though many of the people in the organization were not Christians, not even anybody of any faith, and literally lived their lives socially completely different than I did, they always felt safe there. They always knew that our business wasn't about that lifestyle anyway. Our business was about building a product together. So I think what you're doing, with your marketing, I imagine you don't talk too much about God in that because it's not really relevant. What you're talking about is, here are good business practices, but you're doing it from these principled perspectives that build goodness and trust. Is this what you're doing?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, we may have a tie into faith here or there, but primarily, and it's hoping to have that open the door to have more non-Christian business guests to talk about business, and then tie that into, and then being able to talk to faith, about faith with non-Christian guests, because we have an audience of business people that we're building. So yes.
I hope you keep doing that, because for me, this is one of the things, this channel, it's not a Christian channel. I have had a radio program for 20 years on a Catholic radio network, but this is not that. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that we either can't talk about religion, or we have to talk about a religion in a way that is always about evangelization. Now, I believe in evangelization. I don't want you to hear me as though I don't want people to believe what I believe. But here's how this plays out. You're on the show, and I say, what inspires you? What drives you? And you say, well, my faith. And I go, well, not that. We don't talk about that on here. Well, now, the actual thing that drives you, we can't talk about. So if I were to ask anybody that, and I said, what drives you? And they say, I'm a Stoic. Okay, well, I don't believe in Stoicism. I believe in some of the attributes of Stoicism, but I'm not going to tell them they're wrong, or we can't talk about Stoicism if that's what motivates them or inspires them. Okay, good. We've just learned about you. Interesting. Maybe we could talk about some contrasts here. So I think it's good that you're doing that. I also think it's good because, frankly speaking, if you're going to be a great surgeon, you're going to know the human body and how to heal it. Okay? Give me an atheist surgeon who is the best surgeon on planet Earth over a dedicated Christian that doesn't know the difference between left and right.
Right.
And I'll take it any day. And just like you talked about this confusion, the distraction that takes place, I think the distraction is that somehow, some way, you have to have this particular belief pattern to be effective in the actual profession that you're doing. And it's not true. And it is a distraction. I think it turns people off in a particular way, and it loses the fight. So I just think it's awesome. I've spent this hour and 5 minutes with you, and I'm a fan already. I've subscribed to your channel, by the way, after I watched just a few things too. So there will be more of that coming too.
Thank you.
So if you listen to what Ruslan has to say today, you can join me and be a giant, and we can go slay some dragons together.
Next week on Durand on Demand.
And then I had the luxury of knowing individuals my age whose dads were Navy SEALs. And you get this impression that, they wake up and they drink ox blood and they just lift. But by the time Hell Week rolls around, I think it's just this steely reserve, just like, let's do this, and there's that excitement. It's a mystery. You hear your buddies that have gone through it. And the only way that you can actually experience it is to go through it. And so that time came, and you're just like, oh, a lot of it, Dave, I forgot. There was probably 230 students, and I would say 90% of them were physically able to make it through the training. That wasn't the case because when, a year and a half later when we were graduating, there's 36 of us.
Hey there, Giant. Thanks for watching Durand on Demand. I need your help with something. The world desperately needs more giants. You know it, and I know it. We've been around a lot of people struggling, figuring out how to make things go. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this with as many people as you can. We're going to build this audience, and we're going to help people slay dragons together.